Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lynn Duke, Community Events Manager at Habitat for Humanity Greater Vancouver. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's panel on circular economy and sustainability at home. I would first like to acknowledge the Coast Salish people upon whose ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory our society and the Rebuild Hub have their operations. We are grateful to the guardians of these lands, specifically the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Tsuut'ina, Stolo, and Kwikwetlem nations. We would love to hear from you. For introductions, land sharing acknowledgements, and sharing ideas and stories of sustainability and reuse at home, please use the chat shown at the bottom of the control panel. Any questions for our panelists should be typed into the Q&A box, and we will address as many questions as possible following the presentations. We will be recording this webinar and will share the link after the event. We're very pleased to have Van City support us as a partner for our Sustainability Build Week. As we strive to keep the planet healthy and sustainably thriving, the concept of circular economy is at the forefront of many global discussions. Given we are also in the middle of Waste Reduction Week in Canada, I hope many of you have had a chance to explore some of the great resources and tips that have been popping into our inboxes. Be sure to check in on wrwcanada.com if you haven't already done so. We hope that our webinar will give you some food for thought as you approach your next build, renovation, or design project, or simply to provide new ideas to making more sustainable choices at home. Today, I'm joined by Tim Brazier, Associate of Digital Strategy and Experience for the Rebuild Hub, an initiative of Habitat for Humanity Greater Vancouver, proudly supported by the City of Vancouver, the Vancouver Foundation, the Real Estate Foundation of BC, Van City, and the McLean Foundation. Tim is a passionate environmentalist and is leading the Rebuild Hub on a mission to reduce the 4 million tons of construction and demolition waste that ends up in landfill each year in Canada. Go for it, Tim.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I'm Tim, I head up the Rebuild Hub. And yeah, I'll just start with what the Rebuild Hub is. So our ultimate goal is to reduce the volume of construction and demolition waste ending up in landfill, and also as lower end materials as waste to energy. We're doing this by hoping to create this thriving market for both the supply and demand for salvaged lumber and other building materials in the Lower Mainland and beyond. And we're also part of Habitat for Humanity. So all profits from the Rebuild Hub go towards Habitat for Humanity's affordable build projects for hardworking families like this. So I'm going to give you a quick 101 on the circular economy. And there's a few key principles that we all need to kind of remember and have in mind as we're going through this. So the first one is that waste equals food. Keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that a few times. And that it's all about loops. So here is the kind of big, scary infographic you've probably all been fearing, but we're gonna break it down. The important thing to note here is that there are biological cycles and technical cycles. And biological cycles and the circular economy in that way is just nature. I think we're all pretty familiar with how that works here. And what we're trying to do is just replicate that in our technical cycles. So we're going to kind of zoom in on that technical cycles and how we're doing that there. So the end goal is to just keep the materials in the system for as long as possible and the highest quality as possible. So one way you can do that is maintaining something, make sure it extends its life for as long as possible, reusing it or redistributing it to someone else that maybe wants to extend its life, refurbishing or remanufacturing. This is also upcycling. So the use of the item might change, but most of the materials stay the same. And lastly, recycling is when the individual materials that make up that part or whatever are broken down, and then it's built back up into something. And the key principle here is the smaller the loop, the better. So it's way better to keep something maintained, like keep a door as a door for as long as possible before you break it down into something for recycling and building it back up again. And we're going to come into that. So the other important thing to show is that loops aren't restricted to within an industry, and this requires creativity and networking for the circular economy to work. And I'm going to give an example now. keeping in mind that waste equals food, and this actually comes from the restaurant and hospitality industry. Unfortunately, I'm not talking about the sushi, I'm talking about the wooden chopsticks there. So this is a waste stream from restaurants and hospitality, remembering that that waste equals food for someone else. That becomes food for furniture and design industry with the great work that Chop Value are doing. So again, showing that something can come from one industry and go into the other. It didn't stay within the restaurant and hospitality because there was no use for it there. So some great creative thinking there to make this wonderful furniture and art. So I'm going to come back to a little bit of what we do. So we're Vancouver's Deconstruction and Salvage Network. And what we're doing is taking the waste from deconstruction, renovations, and construction excess. And just to give a definition here, deconstruction is when you take a house or a building apart piece by piece so that you can keep it in those smaller loops as it's higher quality. And then we can accept those salvage materials from those different projects into the Habitat for Humanity restores and also onto our online restore. And then the proceeds we make from that go towards Habitat for Humanity's affordable housing project. So we say deconstruct a home and help build another. So we're helping to promote more deconstruction there. Just to give you an idea of some of the materials that we take furniture, fittings and fixtures, we take the lumber, and depending on the home, there might be some other salvaged building materials, items that we can give a new life to. And to give a greater picture of where some of the other things go, the lumber, some of it may yet be sold, some of it does go to waste to energy plant, depending on its quality. Concrete from a house that's coming from the construction and housing sector can be crushed to produce road fill for the transportation sector. So again, showing it's not just restricted to within one industry. The drywall itself actually does stay within its industry, as that's reproduced to make new gypsum wallboard. And then hazardous materials obviously need to be handled carefully and safely. And so the other side, once we've taken those materials, is kind of showing where that food goes. So there's already some great people and organizations who are using salvage materials. We'll see Garrett later, and turning them into art, furniture, bring them into design. And we hope to kind of promote this and inspire others, both individuals and new artists and organizations, to start using salvage materials more. And that's going to help create this market. Why are we all doing this? Well, there's a pretty big fact that 4 million tons of construction and demolition waste ends up in landfill each year in Canada. And to put that into scale, it's about 80,000 homes worth of waste. And is around 30 to 40% of all waste in Canada, depending on where you live. So this is a real big problem here, just with the construction demolition waste sector. So coming a little bit more practical now, what does this all look like for you? Circular going at home, unfortunately, isn't like this stock recycling image here. It's a little bit more dealing with this is what we're looking at. And we're going to come back to those principles that I said around maintenance, reuse, refurbishing, and then lastly, recycling, and how we can consider these loops when we're doing our next rebuild, our renovation or redecoration. And so I've got 5 questions to ask yourself when you're on your next project. So number 1, do you really need to renovate or redecorate? Or actually, does it just need some maintenance and a little bit of love? Number 2, do you need to renovate and remove everything? Do you need to strip the whole room, or actually can some parts of it remain? Maybe they just need some maintenance and some care, and then you can strip out other parts rather than taking everything out. For the parts that you do take out, can you recycle, upcycle or use them elsewhere in your home or in another use? And then lastly, if you can't use them, thinking about, all right, who can we give these materials to, who can turn that waste into food, and whether that's reuse, refurbish, or recycling, and starting to think about getting creative with where you're sending that there. And then lastly, when you're purchasing new materials, which you're never going to have to do on a build project or a renovation, thinking about where do they come? Are they recycled? Are they already part of a loop? Or how are they going to fit into a loop at the end when you're done with them? So, and again, I'm just going to say loops, not just within industries, but loops are restricted within a room or within a house. And we'll see some nice examples of that later. And I'm just going to give another quick example from the city of Vancouver. So this was a deconstruction of a 1910 home done in 2018 by the Unbuilders, working with Rebuild Hub and Habitat for Humanity. You can see the breakdown of what was recycled, reused, and then ultimately what was left to be disposed of there, as well as the cost comparison. And because Habitat for Humanity is a charity, when you donate materials to them, you get a tax receipt. And that makes deconstruction competitive in pricing with demolition. So we're just the next slide shows this breakdown of where the different things went within that house deconstruction. So Habitat for Humanity and the Rebuild Hub, we were able to accept all the appliances, interior doors, baseboards, that flooring, and some of the lumber. Unfortunately, some of the lumber does go to waste to energy, depending on its quality. Again, we can see that plaster going into new wallboard and the concrete going into the road fill there. And just to kind of complete the cycle, the lumber which came into the Rebuild Hub, that went on to go to Welcome Parlor Ice Cream Shop in North Vancouver and become this beautiful feature wall. So again, this has come from the housing sector and is now going into the restaurant and hospitality sector. So again, we can see how these loops, they overlap into different sectors. And yeah, I hope that's given you a good idea of the circular economy and how you can apply that to your next kind of projects with those questions. And please feel free to connect. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. I'm so glad you actually broke down that group of overwhelming circles for us. This next presenter recently joined HDR as a senior interior designer with several designations, including RID, NCIDQ, LEED IDNC. William Dahl supports a diverse range of projects and is presently working on the new St. Paul's Hospital. A self-described lifelong learner, he focuses on elevating the relationship between people and the spaces they occupy. Welcome to you, William.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to focus on is that as a commercial interior designer, sustainability is one of the things that really underpins what we do. And it's not so much something that is something that we look at as a decorative approach. It's not something we think about as something that you add or layer into a project. It underpins how we design and how we start a project. So I'm just going to focus briefly on some of these topics as they relate to home and how we renovate our home spaces. Having just gone through a renovation of my daughter's bedroom, it's very clear to me what's involved, and I can kind of walk you through some of this. So we're going to talk about some sustainable choices relating to materials. And very briefly, we're just going to touch on the Interior Design Institute of British Columbia and our Climate Action and Innovation Committee, and some of the things that we're talking about and advocating for within the interior design community. So I think everybody is quite clear now. Moving forward, we've got a challenge coming up. 2030 is approaching, and design and the society really needs to change in terms of how we're living and what we're using, the materiality, and what we're wasting, really, because it's coming to a bit of a crunch here. So let's talk about some sustainable choices in materials. One of the first things that we want to talk about is that materials that we use in interiors, for commercial spaces, there's a lot of things that we are really working to exclude, but unfortunately for residential spaces, a lot of manufacturers really aren't considering these issues, and it's up to consumers really to focus on these. So first off, VOCs, volatile organic compounds, it's kind of that new car smell. It's the vinyl, that pungent smell you get when you get some new roller blinds that are vinyl or something along that line. Urea formaldehyde, it's a product that we don't use in commercial spaces, but it's readily present in in plywood and other products for residential. I understand that formaldehyde is also used in no iron fabrics. So things to think about. HFCs, we eliminated CFCs back in the Montreal Protocol, but we are now dealing with HFCs, which are really dangerous chemicals and are affecting the stratosphere. And we need to basically have another Montreal Protocol to deal with HFCs. Vinyl, it's everywhere. You've got luxury vinyl flooring is widely promoted as a great product, but vinyl burns, and when it burns, it produces dioxins. Dioxins, if you will remember about the Russian politician in the UK, got poisoned with dioxin, and it was horrible. It's not something you want to follow up on. Endocrine disruptors, the softeners that are added to PVC cause a lot of problems. The endocrine system is your hormones. So when something disrupts your hormones, you need on the order of 1,000 times less. So if 1% causes cancer, 0.001 disrupts your hormones. So things to think about. So let's focus on material, looking at a room, starting with wall finishes, essentially ceilings as well. Looking at alternate kind of paints to use. Faro and Ball produces clay-based paints. There are other formulations which include natural minerals to produce the colors. And some companies have low VOC formulations. Something to think about is that a lot of companies don't have low VOC colorants. So the base white paint that your colors are added to may be low VOC, but the formulation, once you add the color and you get a rich, deep color, might be quite high VOC. And then finally, when you're painting, what do you do with all the products? When renovating my daughter's bedroom and recent painting jobs at home, it became kind of clear that it wasn't a good idea to be rinsing this down the drain. So we've taken to actually disposing of all the rollers and the brushes that we're using, because we're trying to keep them from toxifying our sewage system. Flooring, what do you do for a floor that is kind of better for the environment or better for your own indoor air quality? Wool carpet works really great in terms of repelling dirt, and it's natural. There's also a wool carpet that's available for people with really high sensitivities. Engineered wood floors tend to use less wood of the hardwood, which is the top wear layer, which is really the part of the floor that you really are concerned about. And then you have softwoods underneath, which grow much faster. Linoleum is a great sheet good product, and it's all natural. It was historically used on battleships and classically called battleship linoleum. It's a great product. It's been around for years, and it's got tried and true usage. Panel products are a big issue we have because a lot of the standard particle board, MDF, plywood are using urea formaldehyde glues. So NAUF is no added urea formaldehyde. When you're looking for plywood, MDF, particle board products, you want to start looking for products that are identified as NAUF. Another alternative is bio-based adhesives, and there are some manufacturers now that have switched to soy-based adhesives for particle board and MDF type products, and that's a great advance and really encouraging innovation. Fastening leads into something that we're going to be talking about with the Interior Design Institute. When we take and bond things, materials, bond a metal to a plywood, bond materials that can't be separated in the future for recycling, we're really creating waste. And so if we can focus on mechanical fastening, then we start focusing on systems that can be separated, metals that can be recycled, plywoods that can be repurposed. And again, looking for bio-based adhesives when we're looking for a fixed solution. In lighting, really we're looking at great advances in LED, and particularly when we're looking at energy usage. If you consider using dimmers, using a dimmer actually reduces the amount of energy that the LED is pulling. So even though it might be rated at 9 or 18 watts, when you put a dimmer on it, you could be actually using substantially less. Color shifting is a new area in LED, and it leads into what we're going to talk about, circadian rhythms, on the Interior Design Institute. And I'm going to flip to that right now. So daylighting is a huge issue that we're starting to learn about, and it affects how people behave. And given how much time we spend indoors, this is really important. So daylighting during the day times, and if you start the day, you're starting off with sort of yellow light in the indoor, and in the early morning, it's a more yellow light. During the middle of the day, it's a bluer light that the sun gives off, and then towards the end of the day, things switch to yellow. In a lot of our indoor environments, we have one consistent lighting color, and that affects how our bodies react and settle in for the day. So how do light levels and the colors of light affect your circadian rhythms and your day-night shift? We're also focusing in our Climate Action and Innovation Committee on adaptability and change. How are we focusing on the design of spaces so that those spaces can be changed and adapted in the future without requiring major renovations? That's really important when we're starting to consider about climate action. Modularity and the ability to reuse products. So when we design a commercial space and we're looking at putting in a great big feature wall, what is the possibility that when that commercial project needs to be renovated, that product is going to get in the waste stream? When we can start to consider modularity and designing modular systems, then we can start to look at the possibility that those systems could be repurposed for a charity or found a new home through, for example, the Rebuild Hub. Professional interior designers play a role. We are educated, and we have a specific purpose in protecting and life safety issues related to the public. And so I wanted to really focus on, to close out here, that well-considered and thoughtful design really is the foundation, and it really is truly the most sustainable solution. Thank you.
Wow, that was fabulous. What a lot of great information in there, William. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the great work you and the IDIBC are doing to advance the role of design in approaching climate action.
Pleasure.
Lots to be done, but you're off to a great start. So thank you. And next up, we have Christina Radvak, who is a project manager with Lighthouse Sustainability Society. She works alongside consultants and contractors to make their sustainability goals become a reality. Starting off her career, Christina developed and led the Deconstruction program at Habitat for Humanity, where she did interior salvage work as well as structural deconstruction. At Lighthouse, she works with policy, research, and program development to divert construction waste alongside designers, owners, contractors, and policymakers. Welcome to you, Christina.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Christina. I work at Lighthouse as a project manager. And if you're not familiar with Lighthouse, we are a nonprofit whose mission is to create a regenerative built environment that nurtures ecological and human health. And normally we work a lot with the building industry around how to become more circular, be better for the people in our communities, be better for the planet. We do this by working alongside architects and engineers, developers to try and help them create better projects. We do a lot of research, and we also work with policymakers. So today I'm looking forward to talking about how to also integrate circular economy principles for homeowners and small builders. So hopefully there'll be some small lessons that you can learn today. And I just want to acknowledge that a lot of these principles that we're talking about they're inherently Indigenous values that go back to how to respect the land and respect the resources that we have available. So these aren't necessarily new concepts. And that I'm speaking today from the Tsleil-Waututh, Stillwater, and Musqueam unceded lands. So today we're going to talk about just a quick what is the impact of waste, and talking about design for disassembly principles, material choice, and some construction techniques. And, as was touched on briefly, construction waste is a really big problem. It's a lot of volume of waste. We have 40 tons of waste. That's, fun fact, at a minimum, that's 250 hot tubs that one single family home can produce. And in 2018, there was over 2,500 single family homes that were demolished. So it's a lot. We have a lot of waste that we're dealing with. And furthermore, it's not just volume of waste, there's inherently embodied carbon that's integrated with all the materials. So when we demolish a home, we're losing all that embodied carbon if it all goes to the landfill. And even recycling is considered, you're not using it to its highest and best use. But the materials themselves, embodied carbon considers the materials from when they're extracted to when they're transported to a facility to be processed, manufactured, installed within a building, and when they're thrown away. So the building industry itself has 11% of the global emissions, just in the materials, not considering operations or anything. And that's what we're experiencing today, not 50 years down the line after the whole life of the building with all the emissions. Buildings are being built today with materials. And I just want to point out that 55% in average of the building's structure is the carbon emissions is 55% of that. So the structure of the building has a huge impact on carbon emissions. At Lighthouse, we like to think about the circular economy looking something like this within the building industry. So you have your house at the top is where you live, and let's say you want to have a new house, so you deconstruct it, and then those materials go to a designer, an engineer, architect, and they take those materials and they design them into something new and amazing for you. And also considering what is the end life of that building going to be. And then we build it, considering trying to reuse as much materials as possible. And then the cycle continues. So something to consider, that the greenest building is a building that already exists. And now this isn't always possible, but if it is, renovations, retrofits are a really great option for older existing buildings that may not be efficient. It can take as long as 80 years for a new building to outperform or to make up all of the negative impacts of construction and demolition compared to just keeping the existing building. So, when we have a climate crisis at hand, we really have to be careful as to what we're doing right now and, considering all of the impacts that it has. But let's say you're going to do a renovation or a new build. There's a lot of things to consider. So, single family homes, we build them with wood, and that has a lot, as we've covered, there's a lot of impact in the structural component of a building. So clean wood has a lot of opportunities to be reused, either if you have large volumes, that those can be donated if they're denailed and clean. I've also had really great success, just posting things for free on Craigslist or on, whatever, Kijiji and whatnot. There's a lot of opportunity for people to reuse, especially with prices of lumber right now. And, if you're not sure how to do how to manage your waste. There's professionals like Sea to Sky Removal and Green Coast Rubbish that do a really great job and know a lot about how to do things responsibly. And when building, there's some things to take in consideration. So design for disassembly is a concept that takes into consideration the future life of the building that will eventually require repairs and renovations, and it will come down at some point in its life. And with that in mind, if you keep these things in mind, you can build the building so that there'll be less waste produced, it'll be faster to disassemble, and it'll save time and money in the end. So when considering materials to use, consider durability, the maintenance, and the end of life. Durability is, it's ensuring that you're using quality materials, because if you want to take it apart at some point, or if someone's going to take it apart, then you want to make sure it's not just going to fall apart and that it actually has a future life. Maintenance, does it have to be maintained? Is that going to compromise the quality of the material if it's not maintained? And what is the end of life? Is it going to be recycled? Is it going to be reused, as was previously mentioned? Some materials that you want to avoid. There's been some really great materials that have been brought up already, but practically when you're actually creating connections and through the actual construction process, construction glue, trying to avoid gluing things down. For example, using a floating floor instead of gluing your floor down. Spray foam insulation. It is definitely think about using other forms of insulation to insulate the home, because spray foam sticks to a lot, and then that product, the whole thing gets thrown away. And spray foam, even for little cracks and whatnot, it can be really hard to unstick those things, even if you have to fix something, for example, like sealing the cracks around doors. If you ever have to replace that door, it's a pain to have to deal with that. And then you have to, if you want to reuse the door at some point, then you have to deal with that down the line. When looking at materials, there's a certification called Cradle to Cradle that is really great. Cradle to Cradle looks at, it is a certification by manufacturers to ensure that the product is circular, it's responsibly made, it's safe for human health and for the planet. Built Green is a certification for single family homes that considers materials as well. It considers efficient framing techniques, environmentally preferable products, durable construction, and they actually work with organizations to offer mortgage rebates. Another fantastic building technique is modular construction. It has, when using modular construction, it offers up to 90% reduction in waste, just because the building is built in a controlled environment in a factory, so a lot of the material can be reused, and it's very efficient that way. It also reduces the construction schedule by quite a bit, because a lot of the work is done off-site. You can potentially work with your contractor to make it be able to be disassembled again. If you're going to be moving, you can take your house with you potentially. And also higher qualities of construction and less exposure to elements. So it's definitely something. It's a growing industry. It's a growing method in BC, and we hope to see more of that. So if any of this sounds of interest, if you're interested in the circular economy and applying some of these things to some of your projects coming up, there's a lot of great aspects to it. You can reduce disposal costs. You can generate economic growth by utilizing the materials that you have. It reduces impact on the landfill and on the planet. But do know that it is time consuming. It does take some time. It requires some research, and it's going to not be necessarily easy at first, but it's a skill. It's a circular economy skill that you have to build up and grow. So take small wins, work your way up, and try not to get too overwhelmed. But it is something that I find once you have had that success and you've seen materials being reused, it's really hard to go back to old ways. So it's definitely worth taking the time and effort to really think about and plan things out from the beginning. So thank you very much. And I'll pass it on to Lynn.
Much appreciated, Christina. You offered a lot of great tips and some excellent insight as to how we need to think about disassembly from the beginning of a project, not trying to deal with it later on. So thank you for that. Our next presenter is Garrett Robinson, who started building furniture as a hobby in his garage in Mount Pleasant about 7 years ago, using various reclaimed materials such as pallets and cedar fencing. Serendipitously, a pre-1940s heritage home was being renovated across the street at this time, and he started salvaging the old growth Douglas fir lumber from the bin on site. He has been in love with this material ever since, and thus First Growth Reclaimed Design was born. Garrett will be sharing how he incorporates these salvage materials into design and new furniture. Take it away, Garrett.
So my name is Garrett Robinson. I'm as Lynn mentioned, the owner of First Growth Reclaimed. I also was the manager for the last year up until a couple months ago of Heritage Lumber, which is the sales division of Unbuilders Deconstruction. So I was doing that, selling reclaimed lumber for the last year and managing that company. But I'm back to First Growth Reclaim and going back into the history of it was a very, like Lynn said, very serendipitous. It came from a very DIY, humble beginnings. If you told me that I was going to own a reclaimed woodworking company 10 years ago, I would have said you're crazy. It wasn't something I ever imagined for myself. And I was building. I had started building a few things for my home in my little garage that I rented. It was in Mount Pleasant. It was an old heritage home and an old rickety garage that I was just barely had any tools. I was like hand sawing things and then I was like a few weeks into that when this home was getting deconstructed. Well, it was actually getting moved on the property. So it was getting moved, and then a laneway was getting put in the same style. And it was an old Dutch colonial style home, kind of that barn shape. And it was a really cool project because they renovated it. They kept a lot of the material, but they still did throw out quite a bit of this lumber. So this is literally like, 10 meters from where my garage was. So I started rummaging through the bin and finding this wood, and I asked a friend, another woodworker, I'm like, do you think this stuff is worth salvaging? And there's tons of nails. He said, oh no, I think it's worth it. So we started playing around with it, and I literally, like Lynn said, I fell in love with this material. The smell of it, it was all Douglas fir. The smell of it, the look of it, the grain, everything was so beautiful. So ever since then, what I've done at First Growth Reclaimed is we build furniture. We kind of have three streams of things we do now, and we have small laser cut items. I'm actually going to just show you guys. So this is a laser cut reclaimed Douglas fir ornament. So we obviously do a lot of these at Christmas time. We actually sell out at Capilano. We do a lot of custom stuff for Capilano. They also own Moraine Lake Lodge, and so we do these laser cut items. Most of the work, as you can imagine, is milling the wood into these thin pieces. So we mill it into 4-inch slats out of some of the larger material, and we make these beautiful little laser cut items. And then we also do we do a lot of corporate gifting. So a lot of real estate agents and mortgage brokers purchase for closing gifts. They purchase cutting boards and serving trays from us. So you can see here, I'll just show you one of these cutting boards. This will give you a good view. So this is all end grain. Now you can see this is actually 2x6. These were 2x6s from an old heritage home that was torn down in Vancouver. So this would have been, maybe it was roof trusses, or it wouldn't have been joists most likely, but because they're 2x6, but we cut them into 4.5-inch wide pieces, glue them up, and then, you know, flip them so you get the end grain. Now, obviously, so if I didn't mention, it's 99% of what we use is the reclaimed Douglas fir, and I'd say 90% of wood in these old homes that are being deconstructed, and you've gotten a lot of good stats on that from the last two speakers. But the majority of the lumber in there is Douglas fir, and the majority is old growth Douglas fir. And we all know how precious our old growth forests are, and how precious this old growth material. You can see how tight a lot of this the grain is on these in the material. So it is absolutely beautiful. And so it was used from everything from the flooring to, you know, all of the structural. So all of the joists, all of the foundation beams, all of the finishes, the built-ins, the doors, the windows, the shiplap. Before there was plywood, and they used solid wood. There was, you know, this is up until probably, I don't know, maybe the 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe later. It was all shiplap. So, and that was like the garbage cuts of the trees. But now that material, because that's underneath the floors, it's underneath the siding, that material is absolutely beautiful to use for feature walls. And a lot of people do that. So, but this typically, I mean, there's a mix of hemlock, there's a mix of cedar, especially in the shiplap, but all of your structural is going to be Douglas fir. Some of the beams will be cedar, but only when they're vertical, because cedar isn't strong enough. So cedar is obviously, it's more of an exterior use lumber. So it was used for siding, but interior structural Douglas fir is very, very strong. And it's just such a beautiful wood. So actually, here's a good, I have this piece actually, I have, as you can imagine, tons of Douglas fir pieces. So this is a really cool, it was turned by a friend, and you can kind of see the grain in there, how beautiful it is and how tight those grain rings are. And that's what the old growth lumber has, those beautiful tight grains. Now I did grab like what a raw piece of lumber would look like coming out. Now this is probably from a home that is I would say, you know, maybe 1960s, 70s, 80s, because it's not rough sawn on any side. The older material is rough sawn, but you can still see this is a beautiful piece, like old growth lumber, and you can see those grain. Hopefully I know it's a little bit bright, but you can see the oh, there you go. You can see how tight that grain is and how many years. I mean, you can probably count at least 60, 70 years there. But a lot of the lumber, so that's a 2x8. So that would have been a joist in a home. Now, a lot of the material, especially when it's pre-1940s comes out, it's rough sawn. So it has a beautiful patina. Now that is brilliant for these rustic, you know, if you want that rustic look. So feature walls, tables, any type of furniture. And this is the only piece I had available, but this is an example of the rough sawn kind of patina you get on the majority of the wood that comes out of these old homes. And there's just so much versatility when you get the wood like that. So we can go rustic, or we can clean it right up and make it very modern looking. So we've done a lot of, like, we did a project for 10 Tree Clothing recently. We did their a retail space, which is within Make on Granville Island. And we did these mid-century modern style chairs, absolutely gorgeous. Like, and so you have to be a little more, you have to, you know, when you get this lumber, there's various different cuts. So if you're doing fine furniture, certain types of pieces, just like they would when they made Douglas fir flooring or windows or doors, they take the, you know, the nicest cuts, like the vertical grain, because it's not going to move. So because our softwoods here, they do move a lot. And so that's one of the challenges with using, you know, some of the softer woods for more fine furniture project, is that they can move. So you got to be, you know, cognizant of that. Obviously, another challenging aspect when using reclaimed material is it's a lot of work to denail it, but it's well worth it. And it is. As you've heard some of the stats, like the amount of wood that gets thrown out, we have a lot of people, changing this, but with 1,000 homes on average coming down in the city of Vancouver, and then 2,500 to 3,000 homes coming down in the Lower Mainland, it is absolutely vital that we do everything we can to support the use of these reclaimed materials. Let's see what else I have here. You can do also, I have tons of stuff here actually, just in my home. I realized this is a cool laser etched on a piece of reclaimed fir. Little Anthony Bourdain there that I just happen to have kicking around. I make, for my home, I make coasters. So obviously a lot of this stuff's laser cut, but simple stuff. Here's an iPad holder that I, very, very simple. Just did it on the table saw. Coat racks. Something you could do is go grab a piece of wood, build a coat rack. That was one of my first projects, and or a shelving or something. It's very simple. Grab it from Habitat for Humanity. Heritage Lumber as well has a great supply. But the 10 minutes went very fast. So I hope you got a little bit more information, and thanks.
Thank you, Garrett. We could look at your work all day long. I know I could. Your work is stunning, and it's exciting to see these materials find a new life. And your cell phone stand was one of the top items on my Christmas giving list last year, actually. So thank you for that. And finally, we're excited to bring you a real life case study from one of our favorite people in the waste management sector. She recently did a home renovation project that truly embodies the principles of circular economy and sustainability. Please enjoy this presentation from Sheila Malloy.
Well, I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there in person, but thanks for having my very short story about my renovation diversion. My name is Sheila Malloy, and I am the very proud Executive Director of the Coast Waste Management Association. So to show some leadership in my industry, I decided that it was definitely in my best interest to give this whole how do I divert as much as I can from my renovation away from the landfill and to other great reasons and purposes and uses. And that was really fun actually to try for a few reasons, not just because I'm in the industry, but also because it's creative and it really enlightened me on how difficult this can be, but then also in some ways how simple, I think with some changes, we can all make these changes to the way that we do renovation. So here we go. So this is Casa Malloy and our renovation. We were so glad to have the unbuilders help us with the deconstruction. So we didn't do the whole house, just pieces of it. And they were fantastic to help us bring everything down. Even the wood you see here in the shower, in the bathroom, that came down and was reused later. A lot of the new stuff that we got, of course, that generated some waste too. So we had to be really critical about how we used it and how much we bought, and, asked our trades to at least take part in the, diversion with us to say, hey, if we can minimize this as best we can. So really think about your cuts and things like that. And they were all on board. So I was very lucky. And then thinking about things like, we didn't like the style of a sink, but we really liked that everything worked in this small powder room. Let's see if we can find some used pieces of quartz and other ways of just avoiding taking it all down, working with it, building it up, putting a vessel sink on there. And what a great way to reuse what was already there. We did try to keep as much stuff as we could, but, we ended up having to do our floors because they were originally aggregate. And so, yes, that's right, aggregate, like stones. So what we had to do was pour a lot of self-leveling concrete to actually get wood in place, which of course led to all of the different things that happen when you have to raise your floor. So all the baseboards and the mirrors around the fireplaces and absolutely everything had to change. So that's a concern when you want to, avoid having too much renovation garbage. But, we found some homes for everything with the help of unbuilders. Before I get there, I will say we also took a lot of time to creatively think about, working with what was there that maybe didn't work for us, but was still good quality. So what we did instead was we made sure that we found pieces that would work with it that we loved. And then all of a sudden, it totally generated a whole new look, in a kitchen that, I wouldn't normally be all into. And it's like, now I love it every day because we just picked really good countertop that went and made it all look good. So here's where things ended up. So one small partial home deconstruction and reno project. So the unbuilders, with all of their expertise, were able to find a lot of homes for things, including Habitat for Humanity. Vancouver Island took a lot of the really good stuff that wasn't our style, but was still in great shape. So pedestal sinks, cabinet mirrors, light sconces, a bathtub faucet, towel racks, Kenmore washer and dryer, which as a stackable is really small and there's no way that would work for us, bathroom sink and faucet, and kitchen sink. The baseboards and the casings went to a very pleased woman named Britt, who was building a tiny home, and a very lucky individual got the steel shelving and white MDF shelf units that we had that went on Craigslist. And then we were able to reuse a lot of things. We actually kept the bathtub and we kept a lot of things, the toilets and things that we said, hey, these are really good. We just need to kind of repurpose and make the rooms better for us. We kept a lot of the original kitchen countertops, which we replaced, and we used them in the laundry room, so we repurposed them. Deconstructed wood, we built a recycle center. Bathroom floor, concrete, well, we reused it as fill, so that's a no-brainer. And then the clean drywall cuts went into the garden because every soil could use a little bit of drywall, let me tell you. Homeowners also found, that would be me, found more places for lights with Habitat Vancouver Island, as well as a neighbor took some clean wood scraps. Finally, we did end up taking a bunch of recycling to the Heartland landfill, which included all the packaging cardboard, styrofoam, and then electrical stuffs and light bulbs. So every time you have a renovation and you buy new stuff, there's tons of cardboard and styrofoam. So we at least found a home for that. All right. Really quickly now, here's the recycle center we built out of cedar wood and all of the wood that was inside the house. And to finish off, what didn't get diverted? Well, plastic wrap, some electrical stuff that was damaged, an old Lazy Susan, some wrecked insulation, painted drywall, taping and mud gone wild, so that stuff's really not useful anywhere. Icky glue, so much glue, and window caulk, whatever, so much of that in a renovation. Tile scraps, fireplace mirrors, really didn't have a place to find a home for those, and then the empty bags of the self-leveling concrete. But overall, the demo project was only one bag contractor size, and the construction was 4 bags contractor size. So all in all, it was 5 bags for a good portion of our house, which of course now we're at peace with and love so much and was good for the environment.
Great work, Sheila. And thank you so much for taking the time to prepare this. We know you're super busy this week with all activities for Waste Reduction Week. So I just wanted to say we've got a couple of questions here. I think, Tim, this first one is for you. Vanessa Richmond is asking, how is the Rebuild Hub linked to Unbuilders and Heritage Lumber?
So we have a really good relationship with the Unbuilders. They were funded by a grant by the City of Vancouver, and they're included in that, and that they do the assessment of the home or the building to consider how much material is in there and how much it might be worth, as well as carrying out the deconstruction themselves. And then they will send some of the materials to us. They are sending some of the lumber to Heritage Lumber to kind of sell on there. And yeah, it's and the important thing is like all of this material is being kept in the system, and it depends on the home, and it depends on the restore and our kind of stocks, depending on what we can and can accept. So yeah, I will say for this, before you turn up to a restore with a big truckload from your renovation, please check with your individual restore ahead of time to kind of check what they can accept, as each store is different.
Awesome. And just letting them know too that they do receive a tax receipt for those materials that come through when Unbuilders deconstructs, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Now a question for William from Tedros. As with your information about paint, William, some are not good for your health. So is it okay to paint with waterproof paint in the lower part of an internal wall in order to be washable? Because sometimes children will write on the wall where they can reach. So what is your take on washable paints?
So I guess I'll put a plug in here for one of the paint companies. Benjamin Moore produces low VOC colorants for all of their range. So their products are also completely scrubbable. We have just used an Ulti matte flat paint in a low VOC in my daughter's bedroom. There was very, very low odor, and it's completely scrubbable because, you know, 6-year-olds do write on the walls, they write on the door frames, they write on everything. So that was definitely a high consideration. So it doesn't mean that you have to go away from a latex or an acrylic paint, but just be very thoughtful about how you're disposing of the waste. Make sure you're drying out all the products, all the cans before you're disposing of them, so the paint is solid. Does that help?
Excellent points. I think that Tedros, you can say in the chat if that answered, but I think those were all good points. So thank you. And from Casimir Kish, any idea how many houses in Vancouver get deconstructed versus demoed? Hard to argue with the tax credits, I would think. Also, how long does it take versus demo? Wow, would be nice to actually have Adam on here to answer these very direct questions. Tim, I don't know if you want to take a stab at it.
Yeah, I have a few stats here. So this is from 2020. The stat I have is that 3,500 homes were taken down in Metro Vancouver, or the ones that we know about in with the Unbuilders was that there were 8 full deconstructions and 28 partial ones. Obviously, there are other players starting to get involved in this game, but yeah, we're at the start of this industry, and this is why we're trying to promote it and have more and more people. There is so much more that needs to be done. Yeah, the tax credit is great, and also the homeowner can, if they decide to sell the lumber, then they get that cost off as well. So there's 2 kind of financial incentives there. The big issue is the time. It can take maybe 2 weeks to a month to deconstruct the home, comparing to maybe 2 to 3 days to demolish it. So we're also trying to work on policy to kind of encourage that and get around that barrier of voice, because that the time is a big factor for a lot of people. I don't know if anyone else wants to touch on that as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And to answer a little bit, or to clarify, that those numbers are really from Vancouver proper. So actually we've got a call from, or a question from Deborah, obviously in West Vancouver. What are the credits and support like in West Vancouver for deconstruction? I mean, the credits would be the same coming through Habitat for Humanity. It's whether what it is looking at the mandate from the governments as to what they require in terms of deconstruction versus demolition. But our aim, and the aim of Unbuilders and Heritage Lumber and everybody, is to ensure that that just gets more and more stringent, so that they're requiring more deconstruction versus demo, correct? Anything else you would add, Tim, or even Garrett, having been with Unbuilders? He might have something to say.
Yeah, I think right now, pre-1940s homes have to be, I think it's pre-1940s. I'm not sure if it's changed, but have to be deconstructed, or they have to be recycled, but the wood doesn't have to be saved in terms of like salvaging it in its form, and like it gets chipped up. So there has been bylaws in place for like 6 years, but most of the majority of companies chip the wood up, and so they can just put it in a bin at the end of the removing all the other materials, and then the wood is that old growth lumber is basically gone after that. So that's why it's very important that we do support, you know, the process of actually saving the lumber, like Unbuilders is doing, where it is going to stay in that circular economy. And the numbers are pretty low for that, as you know, Unbuilders is growing fast and they're doing as much as they can, but there's not a lot of other companies. Well, there is no other companies actually saving besides the odd little bit of salvage that happens. But Victoria, in terms of policy, I think Victoria is becoming the leader in that. Very soon they will have, I think, every pre-1970s home will have to be deconstructed and saved, which is good news.
And if I could also jump in, I think, you know, we may have a lot of residents of different municipalities in Greater Vancouver here. If this is something that you want to see in your municipality, you should definitely contact your local council. And that moves mountains by making sure that they know that their people want to see something like that. Because I know there are some other municipalities in our area that are looking at changing their bylaws, but they need to make sure that they have people on board alongside them. So yeah, that's something that you all can do.
Excellent. Both Christina and Garrett, thank you. I recognize we've gone slightly over. I'm so sorry, but you guys have some great questions and I feel like we could still talk about this for hours to come. Hopefully this just sparks lots of conversations with your family and friends. We would like to thank True Earth actually for providing a highly useful and sustainable gift package as a door prize for today's event. So we've put all of our webinar attendees' names onto a digital wheel to select the winner, and we'll contact the lucky recipient to coordinate delivery. I don't know if we'll have that wheel come up on the share, but I'll just continue speaking, and if it comes up, please join us for more activities with Habitat for Humanity to celebrate Sustainability Build Week. We have an upcycle challenge that is still accepting entries until October 25th. Winner of the $200 restore credit will be announced on Tuesday, October 26th. We still have a few spots available for our build day, November 3rd. Register and fundraise a minimum of $250 to experience a build day with us in Mission. And finally, our restores have a week-long sale where you might even find your inspiration for the upcycle challenge. If you can support Habitat's cause through any of these efforts or with a small donation, we'll put a link in the chat. Your support is so greatly appreciated. Karina, have we got the wheel or we'll do that? Yeah, the wheel is coming up. There it is. There's the wheel spinning. Our lucky winner is, Jennifer Hoffbeck. So we'll be in touch with you, Jennifer. Congratulations, and we'll get you that prize package. So huge thanks to our amazing panelists and all of you, our attendees. We're really grateful for you joining us. Thank you and have an amazing rest of your day. See you again sometime. Bye.